During the Second World War, there were many different concentration camps and extermination camps established by the Third Reich. These ultimately had one goal in mind: mass murder and killing. There were many guards that gained notorious reputations, for example Josef Kramer, the Beast of Belsen, the Commandant of Bergen-Belsen. He became known for his brutal treatment and the conditions of Belsen, which caused the deaths of hundreds each day from disease and starvation. Irma Grazer was another guard who gained a notorious name for her evil and brutality with regards to how she treated female prisoners. These both worked at a concentration camp, but there was a different sort of camp built by the Nazis that sought to be solely intent on causing death. The extermination camps had no facilities for people to stay inside of, only those who were forced to help with the killing process, and they were centres where thousands were killed each hour. One of the most deadliest camps was Treblinka, which victims were loaded onto trains and transported there. Once they arrived, they were driven into the gas chambers, and many were treated brutally on their journey to their final moments. Today we look at a mysterious guard known as Ivan the Terrible, who was one of the most evil guards involved in the killing process. Remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Treblinka was an extermination camp inside occupied Poland. It was found inside a forest, northeast of Warsaw, south of the village of Treblinka. It operated between July 1942 and October 1943, and during this period it's estimated that between 700,000 and 900,000 Jews were murdered inside of the gas chambers there. It was the deadliest extermination camp built, and there was only a larger death toll at Auschwitz. It was managed by the German SS, who recruited a number of guards from Soviet prisoners of war camps, who were then forced to serve the Germans, and there were two elements of Treblinka. The first, Treblinka 1, was the forced labour element, where prisoners were ordered to work in the gravel pits, and in the forest where they were forced to cut down the trees for use in the cremation pits. There were only a small amount of workers inside Treblinka 1, who were forced to help in the killing process, and inside the camp around 10,000 people were killed via executions, disease and poor treatment. The second element of Treblinka was the extermination centre. This was where the victims were transported to, and where the gas chambers were that claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands. Within Treblinka 2, there are a number of different sections. The first part of the camp was an administration and residential centre that had a main road and a number of barracks for the Jewish Sonderkommando, who were forced to clean up the atrocities. The SS quarters were also located there, and close by was a receiving area where the railway unloading ramp was found. This was surrounded by barbed wire, and once you were there was no chance of escaping. There were two large barracks here that were where the victims would undress and remove their jewellery and hand over their possessions and valuables. Here also was where women and children had their hair cut short, and then clothes and other belongings were piled up. In a sixth site, the Nazis had created a different shack with a Red Cross symbol on it, and this was a fake hospital or infirmary. Old, sick, wounded and difficult prisoners were taken here, where behind was an open deep pit, and prisoners were led to the edge of the pit and then shot by Blockführer Willy Mentz, and he himself executed thousands of Jews inside of the pit. The third part of Treblinka 2 was the killing area, where the gas chambers were found in the centre. It was hidden from the railway tracks by earthen banks, and from the undressing barracks there was a fenced-off path that went through the forest to the gas chambers. It was nicknamed the Tube or the Road to Heaven, and after a short walk, the victims were then forced into the gas chambers. Treblinka only had one purpose: to murder those people who were sent there. Many who were deported from the Warsaw Ghetto's liquidation arrived at Treblinka, and thousands were being killed each day. After they were told to undress, the Jews were beaten with whips to force them quickly into the gas chambers, and those men who were hesitant and defiant were beaten barbarically and often killed or shot. The victims were told they were going to get deloused, but instead they were killed inside the chambers. Sadistically, women and children were gassed after the men, and often they could hear the screams and shouts of the panicked men as they took their last breaths, and this also caused a huge degree of panic. The survivors of Treblinka told of one guard who in particular was known for his sadistic treatment of Jews and victims, and he was nicknamed Ivan the Terrible. Along with another guard named Nikolai, Ivan the Terrible was known for his horrific treatment and brutal murdering of prisoners. It was said that Ivan was in charge of operating the gas chambers and quickly forcing those men, women and children into the chamber. It was said he would be armed with an iron pipe and a sword, and he would cut, whip and torture people before they were driven into the death chamber. Others also told how he nailed people's ears to walls, gouged out their eyes in violent scenes, and also brutally killed children with his bare hands. It was claimed that these incidents occurred whilst Jews were waiting outside of the chamber. He repeatedly beat victims over the head with his pipe, sometimes bludgeoning them to death, and also he stabbed to death many. One account of Ivan the Terrible and the killing process states, Ivan was tall, and though his eyes seemed kind and gentle, he was a sadist. He enjoyed torturing his victims. Whilst he did this, his face showed sadistic satisfaction, and he laughed and joked. He finished off the victims according to his mood at the moment. On top of all this were other guards, forcing the people towards the 2 Ukrainians who stood by the chamber entrance. Rifle butts shoved and shunted, attack dogs bit and tore flesh from the bones, whilst the guards shouted the abhorrent lies of faster, faster, the water will get cold, others still have to go under the showers. To escape the blows and the dogs, the crowd rushed to its death, pushing into the chamber, the stronger ones shoving the weaker ones ahead of them. The bedlam lasted only a short while, for soon the doors were shut. The chamber was filled, the motor turned on, and connected with the inflow pipes, and within 25 minutes, at the most, all lay, stretched out dead, or to be more accurate, was standing up dead. Since there was not an inch of free space, they just leaned against each other. The brutality of Ivan the Terrible was investigated after the war. Firstly, Treblinka was staffed by 25 SS men, and also around 120 other guards, made up of Russian and Ukrainian POWs. The name Ivan was a common one inside the camp, and was common amongst Ukrainian and Russian men, and many of the guards were given Soviet nicknames. The true identity of the guard has still not today been completely worked out. One key man associated with the work of Ivan the Terrible was John Demjanjuk, who was accused of being Ivan. Demjanjuk was a Ukrainian who worked as a guard at Sobibor, Majdanek, and Flossenburg. He was extradited from the US to Israel and was accused of being a Chornicki man, one of those Soviet men who aided the Nazis in mass murder, and he was accused of crimes against humanity. He faced also crimes of war crimes and was linked to being Ivan the Terrible. However, he claimed it was a case of mistaken identity, but many surviving witnesses of Treblinka identified him as Ivan. Eliyahu Rosenberg was asked by the prosecution if he recognised Demjanjuk, and he asked him to remove his glasses. Rosenberg approached him and stared into his face, and when Demjanjuk smiled and offered his hand, Rosenberg jumped back shouting Grozny, meaning terrible in Polish and Russian. He said, Ivan, without the slightest shadow of a doubt, this is him. It is Ivan from Treblinka, from the gas chambers, the man I am looking at now. I saw his eyes, I saw those murderous eyes. How dare you put out your hand, murderer that you are. However, Rosenberg had previously testified that Ivan the Terrible was killed during a prisoner uprising in Treblinka in 1943. He was identified also by a former German SS guard who also worked at Treblinka. The court sentenced him to death by hanging, but no evidence from the Soviets threw this into doubt, and the credibility of the prosecution's case against Demjanjuk was questioned, and the death sentence was overturned. However, there was proof beyond doubt that he had worked as a guard in an extermination camp, but it could not be proven definitely that he was Ivan the Terrible. He was sent back to America briefly, before he was brought to trial again as an SS guard who served at Sobibor extermination camp, and he was charged with being involved in the deaths of 28,000 people. Demjanjuk was found guilty and was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment, but he died in 2012 pending his appeal. According to Soviet archives, there is evidence that points towards Ivan the Terrible being Ivan Marchenko, and that he had brown hair, hazel eyes, a square face, and a large scar down his neck. This was different to Demjanjuk, and it was said that Marchenko was last seen in Yugoslavia in 1944 and that he fled to the partisans. It was said he was last seen coming out of a brothel, and it was documented that the Soviets were looking for him, but he could not be found. It is noted that if Marchenko was found, then he would be 110 years old today, based on the evidence, putting beyond almost certain doubt that Marchenko, if not killed during the Second World War, would now be dead. Ivan the Terrible was a name that has lived on notoriously, along with the most brutal SS guards who conducted the crimes under the guise of the Second World War. There's much doubt about his true identity, but little can be disputed about the horrific crimes of those staff who worked at Treblinka and were complicit in the deaths of an estimated 900,000 people. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.